In this video, Tony Baxter will tell you some secrets and stories about Disneyland Paris. Tony Baxter is the former Senior Vice President of Creative Development in Walt Disney Imagineering and was responsible for creating designs and carrying out the construction of attractions all over the world. He announced his departure from his full-time position to become a part-time advisor on the 1st of February 2013. During his 47-year tenure with the company, he oversaw the construction of multiple contemporary Disney theme park attractions, including Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, Star Tours, Splash Mountain, the Indiana Jones Adventure, and Journey into Imagination, and served as the executive producer of Disneyland Paris.
Well, Walt Disney began as an artist, and animation was his art, and he surrounded himself with amazing people that created that art. And then as it developed and it became more sophisticated, there was a lot of engineering involved, sound and color and multi-plane cameras, and he built an engineering department. And I think the interesting thing about Imagineering, if you look at the word Imagineering, it's imagination, which is the arts, and it's engineering, which is the sciences and the technologies. And so we have a staff of over 1,000 people, 2,000 people, all around the world. There's the Imagineering in Switzerland, there's one here at Disneyland Paris, Florida, and of course California and Tokyo. And what we do is put artists together with engineers. And the net result is all the amazing things that you see that not only are fun to do, but they work, at least most of the time. You could never do this alone. I knew I had 5 friends, mon amis, that were really, really steeped in everything that's special about Disney. We all grew up with Disneyland in California. And yes, rode my bike there, paid $2 to get in, $2, yeah. And so we grew up with it. We knew what it was like to be a child at Disneyland. And as good as all the people I worked with from Walt's era, they were older. They were adults when they built Disneyland. They never experienced what it was like to be 8 years old and go through the doors to a Magic Kingdom. So all of us knew how to make it right. So there was tremendous confidence. It wasn't like being in charge of something. It was more like, wow, we get one more chance to do this. We know all the things that work at Disneyland. We know all the things that work at Walt Disney World. You know all the things that work in Tokyo. Let's make the most beautiful Disney park ever. And I still believe it is. It started with a wonderful trip through Europe. We started all the way up in England. We went through Denmark, of course, Germany, and we visited not just amusement parks, but all the great sites that people travel to and aspire to see. And I would go to bookshops in all communities, so not in the center of tourists, but like, what do people think about the rest of the world? What are the exciting things? You look at coffee table books and find out what sells and what are people interested in. Out of that, it sort of began to direct the attention. So Frontierland was easy because the French and the Europeans are very interested and intrigued about the American West. Adventureland, there were a lot of theme parks that copied the original Jungle Cruise at Disneyland. And then in fact, one I remember had Viking boats going past the guys that were going over the pole with the rhinoceros, Vikings, I don't know. So we decided not to do that. And we rethought Adventureland, which became more of an Arabian Nights fantasy because Babar the elephant, various stories like Aladdin were very popular here in the same way that the fairy tales of France and Germany were popular to the Americans. So there was a shift. And sometimes things are very magical for us. We decided pirates would be very exciting in the European culture as they are in America. So we built a whole island based on Pirates of the Caribbean and strengthened the pirate ride by adding fighting pirates, which, of course, how did we know that 15 years later, of course, pirates were going to be a huge franchise for the Disney company. So it was fortuitous that we made that decision to make pirates a big part of Adventureland. the big question for, the Fantasyland was, of course, the castle. There was a big attempt to move away from California and Neuschwanstein, which is in Bavaria, and you can see a lot of that in the Disneyland castle. Florida and Tokyo have a lot, and Hong Kong and Disneyland have a lot to do with Neuschwanstein. Florida and Tokyo have a lot to do with the Loire Valley and the castles down one, right here about 100 miles away. So we decided to go much more to the fairy tales and the storybooks, and in particular the artwork designed by Ivan Earle, a great Disney artist. And I was greatly influenced by the unicorn tapestries, which if you have time, those of you who are touring, be sure and go to the Musée d'Imagineering in Paris to see them. They're beautiful. And finally, here we are in Discoveryland. Part of the contract that we signed with the government in France was to develop an area based on celebrating European culture. And so when you look at Space Mountain, that is directly from the Jules Verne story, From Earth to Moon. Of course, the Nautilus is also Jules Verne. The Orbitron out here could be from Leonardo da Vinci. But these are the type of visionaries that really inspired the whole world to go into space, to do the things of the future. And so we thought, what a natural fit that, all the dreams that have been spun around the world really emanated from the European story. So Tom Morris, who is in Fantasyland, came to me when he was in high school, and he wanted to write a report on an Imagineer. And, as we went through college, he came on board and we worked together on many projects. And I think he was typical of what my relationship was with Jeff Burke and Tim Delaney and everyone else. I knew their specialties. Tim is absolutely a genius at doing futuristic, imaginative art. Tom loves fairy tales. Chris loved adventures. And if you look at Jim Burke, he is a cowboy. You will always hear us talking about casting in the theme parks. But I think the most important casting we do is in Imagineering. And each one of these people was absolutely perfect for the area that we're doing. So that made my job very easy. Midway through the construction, we had partnered with an English firm to manage the project. And it was so difficult, so Disney, and not normal in a project that they would be used to, like hospitals and hotels, that we had to take the management of the project back and create our own staff right in the middle of construction. And I think that our management group at Imagineering did an incredible job of that switchover midway through the project. And we had the same amount of money as Tokyo did to build that park. And so the challenge for each of our designers was to find a way to get more of that money out in the area where the guests could enjoy it. And I think they did a fantastic job. In Tokyo, you'll find that the street is covered, and that cost a lot. And we were able to put the arcades, and if you haven't walked through them, they're beautiful, behind Main Street. They were a lot less money. And then with the remainder, we put more beautiful details into Main Street. Well, it's a combination of things. I think the climate, which can be harsh, also allows you to grow things that we can't grow in California or Florida. So as you walk through the park, especially right now in the springtime, it's spectacular. The landscaping is spectacular. Our forests, our hardwood forests in Frontierland, are more beautiful than California or Florida, and it's the youngest forest. It already looks just spectacular. So I think landscape has a big part about it. What I just shared with you about Main Street, that example, we everywhere in every land, we thought that way. So for instance, in California, the Astrojets were up high in the air, and Florida too. And we put them on the ground here, which gave us the extra money to do all the beautiful ornaments on it. So it became a very gorgeous sculpture. And so those kind of ways of thinking about a whole park were very important to make it far more spectacular. Disneyland is the only park that Walt Disney ever saw, which is amazing considering all that we've done, and we still think of him. But I grew up with Disneyland, so it's my backyard. And to get to play in your backyard is the best thing a kid could ever get, you know? So I did have the opportunity to meet Walt Disney. I was working at Disneyland as an ice cream vendor, scooping ice cream. And Walt would come every Friday after work, and he would stay in an apartment over the fire station on Main Street. And on Saturday morning, that was his fun time. He would get one of the cars on Main Street fired up, and he would drive all around the park. And then I saw him moving towards me, and I had all these ideas I wanted to share with him. I was going to tell him all these things that we could do, and I wanted to be a part of it. And then I felt his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Well, how are things going with you here?" And I said, "Just fine." I took holidays every weekend to go visit, the Alsace region, Germany, Mont Saint-Michel, London, Belgium. And it's all beautiful, and it's all so different. Each country has its own culture and its charm. The castle, I told a little bit about this. We were very concerned that if we replicated beautiful architecture, it would be taken poorly. So we convinced management to redesign the castle from scratch, a little bit smaller than Walt Disney World, but bigger than Disneyland and Hong Kong. And the most important thing, I think, was the shift in making it a fairy tale setting. In all the other parks, the castle is sitting flat on the same level as Main Street. And we knew we wanted to try and create that image of a romantic French or German fairy tale where the castle is up on a hillside and the prince goes riding up to the princess in the castle and dragons live underneath it. So those were the things that kind of guided us. Ivan Earl, definitely the artist responsible for Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty. You can see his influence in that. And again, as I mentioned, in the beautiful unicorn tapestries, there's also a book of the hours by the Duc de Berry that is, I believe, up in Chantilly Castle. And the pages from that book were very inspirational, Ivan Earl, at the beginning. So it looks French, but it's surely fairy tale. Disneyland Hotel was such a challenge for us, and there was no money to do it. And we had to convince Michael Eisner to get rid of one of the hotels out in the village and give us that funding to do this hotel. And everyone in the company said, people will be standing on the balconies in their underwear, they'll be hanging their clothes out to dry, they'll be bothered by the parades on Main Street. There were a million reasons why we should do. And but both Frank and Michael agreed that it was a beautiful design, and Eddie Sato worked very, very hard to incorporate that into Main Street. We shrunk the train station so that as you walk back down Main Street, hotel works as the icon at the end of the street in the same way that the train station does for our other parks. It had never been done before, and now, of course, there's one in Tokyo, and we have the Grand Californian in California, and the Miracosta in Tokyo. And it's become a Disney thing. And the reason we built the hotel is we studied how people go to resorts and beautiful gardens and everything. And there's a great appreciation in the European community for a sense of arrival. And at Disneyland and even World, it's kind of, you're processed a lot before you get into the beauty of the parks. And if you go to the Versailles or the Tuileries or, now along the Loire with Chanoso, Chambord, it's a gorgeous experience of arriving. And I think it feels more like it's a gift to the people to come off of the RER trains and see the beauty of those gardens and the romance of the castle hotel before you go in. It's a very European approach to arriving somewhere. So again, we felt it was important to do it, to be comfortable. If you look over here in this area, you'll see two circles on the wall. Those used to be, they were actually installed, tubes that took you to Space Mountain. And all the attractions in Discoveryland were going to go into Space Mountain. And it was a vast covered land in there with the Nautilus below and the Space Mountain ride above, and tubes that took you off to each of the attractions. And that was how you were going to get to all of the attractions. Well, we weren't able to do that. We couldn't afford it. So I would love to come back now and spend some more effort and really complete this land.